On this episode, we have Jamie Pletcher, and she's been a commercial real estate agent for the last 5 years. And I'm excited to have her on and gain some of her insights in regards to being a younger entrepreneur. So Jamie, I was curious, how did you get into becoming a commercial real estate agent?
It's a bit of a long, windy road, but I actually started as an investor. I was working at an outdoor company, and we decided to get an SBA loan to purchase the building for our business. The building we ended up purchasing was much larger than we needed, but the rule at the SBA is you only have to occupy 51%. So we built a little mezzanine to make those numbers work, and then moved our operation, and I invested in buying the building. So that was great. And it turned out leasing the other half of that building was almost more profitable than the business we were running. So we tried to repeat that. So we got investors together again, bought another building. We didn't occupy them all. We had to move to investment loans. But I just got really interested in it organically and moved through.
Awesome. And have you continued to invest in real estate, or kind of after doing a couple, that was enough for you?
No, as much as I can, I have been investing. So as that process started, I started to manage those properties that we picked up. And so we did a second, and then a third, and then a fourth. And then I was managing all the properties, and I quit working for the outdoor company altogether. Then I went and got my broker license. Kind of every 6 months, we were buying a new property. All of a sudden needed a lot of management and a lot of time. And now the portfolio is getting close to 400,000 square feet, 100 and some tenants. But now I've become the leasing and sales broker for that entire portfolio.
Okay.
When we're raising money and asking people to buy into this as an investment, I need to invest also and prove the pitch.
Yeah, that's awesome. Was that like a syndication, or just like raising other capital, or were you mainly working with a small group of investors that were all doing that, just out of curiosity?
Yeah, it's private and a small group of investors, but that's grown each time as well through word of mouth. I think we have about 75 investors now.
Wow.
We've looked at indication. It requires a lot of SEC rules and things that make it harder, but there's kind of a crowdfunding path you can take to do that. So we've considered it, but right now we have investors wanting to give us money, and we don't have anything to invest it in. So we're not on the hunt for money right now. We're on the hunt for a deal that makes sense.
Are you seeing any opportunities in the market right now in regards to investment? Maybe some of these office buildings that are more vacant, or is that too risky?
Definitely too risky. And I think there's opportunity out there if you have dry powder. Absolutely. There's a lot of value add situations that are out there. But if you need to borrow money, it's a tough environment for sure. Office specifically is kind of its own animal. We've changed the world, and we're not quite sure how it's going to land yet. You would think by now, sort of sorted, but a lot of people are just never coming back. Some businesses don't have that luxury. They need to see clients or be in person, but there's too much office inventory, and doesn't seem like that's going to change.
Yeah, agreed. And the other 400,000 square feet that you guys own currently, was that in a certain sector, or?
A lot of it was flex industrial, where you have a portion of office and then a portion that's warehouse or lab or production, manufacturing, that kind of thing. That's sort of my forte. And that sector has continued to do well because people who are making a thing really can't do it from home. As long as they're going, they need an office there, and it makes sense.
Awesome. That's cool to have that background. So then you decided to become a commercial real estate broker. What was that transition, going from the corporate job to 100%, commission only type of person?
Absolutely terrifying. It's jumping off a cliff for sure. I was very lucky the way it came about. I was managing the commercial properties, and then just decided to go ahead and get my brokerage license because I was doing a lot of in-house leasing already, because it's not really a corporation. It's a very small company that kind of parlayed from this outdoor company to a real estate company because we realized that was a better gig. So I was managing all of the properties there full-time in a salaried position. And then I went to a real estate conference here in Boulder. Well, let me back up. I went to get my brokerage license. And when you do that, you take the test, and then you have to hang your license somewhere. So you need affiliation with some sort of firm. And I could not find a commercial firm anywhere that would hang my license. It was wild. I met and spoke to only men. It was very much giving me the impression that it's a good old boys club and I can beat it. And I was very disheartened by that. I thought, well, there must be a way. But I really honestly came away thinking there must not be any women in this field. I mean, they're actively trying to block it out. And then I went to a conference and I heard a woman as the keynote speaker. And I'm like, what the heck? And here she has her own firm, 2 blocks away, downtown Central Boulder. She'd been here 30 years. And I just didn't find her until that moment. But I went up and introduced myself after she spoke and was like, I'm just so glad to see that there's women in this business, and gave her my brief background. And she was like, well, come on in for an interview. Let's talk some more, and landed.
That's awesome. And what was that transition in your early, because first 3 years, I remember being self-employed for those first 3 years were definitely tough. What were they like for you?
Well, I was fortunate in when I met her, she needed an assistant, but not full-time. Another woman at the firm who's a broker, the only other one, she also needed some help. So I signed on for 20 hours a week, part-time, just to do assistant work. And I kept my full-time job that was salaried. They were nice about letting me work funny hours in here during business hours. So that was absolutely amazing. And I can't imagine how I would have done it without that. I think this business is very difficult to get into. There's not a straightforward educational path. Even if you take all kinds of real estate courses, it's not geared toward commercial. Commercial's a secret world. So a mentorship is what you need. So I was fortunate to have about a year doing assistant work and learning all these nuances that you just can't find out from school. And then I transitioned to being a broker all at once. I left both hourly and salaried jobs at the same moment and said, okay, I'm just going to go out and be a broker on my own now, 100% commission, and definitely scary jumping off a cliff, but confidence will get you a long way.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And I know that you mentioned the mentor. How important is that mentorship to have as you're kind of learning the ropes?
Critical. Absolutely critical. Anybody that's trying to break into a new career, I would highly suggest getting a job at a bar at night and working for free if you can with somebody with excellent experience willing to teach you. You could spend $200,000 going to school and not learn as much as you do filing papers for someone who, once they see you want to learn and you understand, will give you the world. People love to share their knowledge with someone who retains it, accepts it, and wants to learn more. All of a sudden, you're helpful to these people, and they'll share what they know, and you can't find it anywhere else. So if you have to do it for free, do it for free. A gap year is totally worth it, especially if you are just jumping careers all of a sudden. You went down one path and turns out, that's not for me.
Yeah. I totally worked at waiting tables for the first couple of years while I was in my first couple of years of being self-employed. So I can understand that. I think great advice to have a little bit of revenue while you're first getting in is definitely helpful. And I think commercial real estate is probably one of the more difficult or cutthroat careers, I would say, in regards to sales. What do you think have been your 3 biggest learning lessons working in a sales career?
Well, in roundabout ways, I have been in sales throughout time. I worked in restaurants for, at least 10 years, maybe 15. I'm not sure. There's something to front of the house work that really just is sales. It's relationships and something there. I also did interior design work for probably about 5 years. And that was a commissioned job as well. And I learned a lot from doing that. A huge part of it is listening to your customer, understanding what they want, and then trying to provide that. And some people aren't so great at listening and understanding the need of your customer. And once you figure that out, then your knowledge comes into play and you can find what they need. But if you don't have that basis of being able to chat and get to the nitty gritty of it all, some people have a hard time understanding what they want and communicating it to you. So that's the tricky.
No, I think that's huge of listening. One of my coaches that I had paid, and he actually was blind, and he taught a course, and he had 160 attorneys that worked under him in New Jersey. And that was the biggest thing that I learned from him was like listening. And I felt like not a lot of people teach that. Not a lot of people do it well either, is to like truly listen. So that's awesome that you learned that in your career. I think that's one of the biggest things you can learn.
Absolutely. I think it's just a great life skill to have, just to be able to listen to what someone's saying and ascertain what do they need and what do they want or what fixes it. It's the same as if your friend's got a problem with her boyfriend. It's the same thing, really. If you understand the issue, you can solve it.
Where do you get most of your business? Where does most of your business come from?
Well, a lot of it is more senior brokers in the firm that will pull me in on a deal to help them with a tenant finding a space or with a listing to help them do showings, that kind of thing. That was how I got going with some momentum. And then, of course, the portfolio that I was managing, I took over. I have a partner on that, but I took over all the leasing, and then they were continuing to purchase new properties. So that certainly gave me a leg up having a built-in client. And then a lot of times what happens is, somebody calls me for a showing on one of my listings. I take them in there, and while we're looking at it, it's just totally wrong for them. They'll be like, oh, we need this, that, da, da, da. And it's the same thing, listening again. So they're not a fit for my listing, but they still need to go somewhere. So I can then help them find something that is a fit. So a lot of tenant representative relationships come out of a listing appointment that didn't fit.
Okay, got it. And then what advice would you have to other young entrepreneurs that are looking to do better in sales or better in their prospecting?
I really think the key to it all is listening and identifying what your client needs. Sometimes they don't even know. So sometimes it's your job to be a psychologist. Sometimes there are two partners in a business that don't agree on what they need. Sometimes you're a therapist. Sometimes you're an educator. Sometimes you have to wear a lot of hats and just help people figure out what they need extracted out of them. So if you listen, then you can just provide a list of potential solutions and narrow it down and get to the place where everybody's.
Okay, awesome. And what do you feel has been one of the most challenging times in your career?
Right now, this is probably the most challenging. I have only been a broker exclusively for about 5 years, but other experiences leading up to that. But it's been an excellent market my entire career. COVID really threw a wrench in things, but it's taken a while for these ripple effects to show. But the interest rates right now are just making things impossible to make sense. And the cost of money is doubled. So now it's really hard to make things pencil. And sellers aren't always ready to accept the environment that we're in and lower the price. What's happening in our market, which is its own bubble, it's not always paying attention to the rest of the world. But Boulder has a certain value to it. And sellers haven't necessarily adjusted in home prices or in commercial properties, where normally when interest rates go up and demand decreases, prices would go down, but they haven't. So it makes it a tough situation. Yeah,
that definitely is interesting. So with this being one of the most challenging years, how do you keep a positive mindset?
Well, some days I don't, but I try to keep up a good energy. I think I'm a big proponent of either some yoga or meditation or something in the morning, just to start off on the right foot and try to keep things moving and just know that it does work out in the end. What's going on now is things just take twice as long as they used to, but there are still people out there running businesses that need a place to run them out of. And there's still activity, just a lot slower. There's not as much sales activity, certainly, but I do a lot of leasing, and that's fine. It just takes substantially longer. There's a lot of decision from clients, whether it's a business or a home buyer. There's this economy that no one's used to. We've been in this very nice place since 2008. It's been pretty lovely. So this economy is strange. It's an election year. It's all of these things that lead people to indecision. COVID's still playing a role in that. People that are looking for an office aren't sure if they need 1,000 feet or 5,000 feet, because they're like, how many people are going to actually come in? We have to give them a hybrid option now at the very least, because no one will work here if we don't. So it's a tricky landscape from multiple.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome that you've incorporated yoga and meditation. Those are actually two of my favorite things to do to help keep a positive mindset. When I'm doing consulting with business owners, I'm always asking them, how are you feeling emotionally? Because when I was getting all the coaching over 20 years of being an entrepreneur, no one ever kind of asked me, like, how do I feel? And I think that that's such a big part of how your business ends up doing. But incorporating, I think, those rituals and habits of meditation, yoga, working out, whatever that might be. I always say move the body. You could even just be walking on a daily basis. We had a mastermind yesterday with entrepreneurs and was asking them those same question of like, how do you keep a positive mindset? And it was interesting. A lot of the guys were saying that they do walks even 2 times a day. And I thought that was awesome. And I was like, maybe I should start walking a little bit more. I haven't done a lot of walking, but how important has it been to move the body? Is there anything else that you do to really keep that positive mindset and face each day? Because the other thing as an entrepreneur is like, it's hard to get downtime, right? It's like you do have to perform, and it's not something where you could take it. I had some people say, hey, you're an entrepreneur, you could take every day off, right? It's like, unfortunately, no, because there's consequences on the back end.
Yeah, you're really just on call. You're never really off on vacation or not. Things are moving and you have to respond and keep up with deadlines and things that are happening. But yeah, I think movement and exercise is critical. And I think it's critical to find and do whatever it is that helps you keep a positive attitude and your confidence about you, regardless of how you're performing or how you're feeling about your business. Because if you start to feel desperate, and you're desperate for a deal because you just need this money, it comes through, and it comes through as disingenuous, and it never goes well. It starts a downward spiral that can just ruin your whole gig. That's really important, to be confident and selling the person what you're selling, because it's going to ultimately help the person, not not
Yeah.
because I need to pay my mortgage. It's because they have a need and I'm trying to fulfill that need or solve that problem. And if you go in with a sad sack attitude or some kind of desperation, it's obvious and it all goes wrong. So whatever it takes to keep your spirits up, whatever that is for you, do it.
Yeah, that's awesome advice for sure, of kind of doing what's right in the client's interest. And energy is such a huge piece, right? I think it's hard once you lose that momentum. It's kind of like a sports player. Once they've lost that momentum and they get it into it like a negative rut, then they basically stay in that negative rut. And I think the same thing applies to business, is that like if you're in a negative emotional space, like the only way to get out is to change that emotion first and then start to get yourself out. But you also hit a key point on the head of like doing what's right in the client's eyes. Even if you're hungry, you better be doing the right thing for them. So I love that.
And then it eventually comes together if you have the right purpose.
For sure. So it looked like you had 9 years as a marketing director, and it was more like on the corporate side, right? What do you feel like the biggest takeaways that you learned as a marketing director?
It was a small company that I was working for, and it was a lot of grassroots marketing, event planning, boots on the ground style. Of course, we had social media and things like that, but it was a very grassroots approach. And we had people driving, crisscrossing all over the country, and I was planning these crazy tours and just trying to reach people in real life. I think you learn something from every job that you have, every experience, and that's certainly useful. I'd like to think that I market myself and my business, but I'm pretty bad at it, to be honest. I've been busy enough that I don't have time to post things on social media or do all the things that you should do if you're trying to attract new clients. And in this new economic landscape, I probably need to put much more effort into finding clients.
Was there any key things that they were doing that you were seeing working as a marketing director that helped increase their business?
Well, events were our strongest thing.
Cool.
And we started at small sporting competitions and festivals, and then we started doing the GoPro mountain games here in Vail, and then I eventually got it into the Dew Tour and the X Games and on TV and all of these things. We basically made up a sport, if you will.
Okay. What was the sport?
Are you familiar with slacklining?
Yeah, I used to go watch that actually up in Vail.
Yeah, well, so I put that on, that event.
Okay, awesome.
And so
cool.
Slacklining was a thing that people didn't necessarily know about. It's kind of exclusive to the climbing community, but it's a great exercise for any age. It helps with balance, coordination, core strength. It's great, but most people don't know what it is. And that's what I was trying to do, get people to understand what this was and buy a kind of easier version. We made the 2-inch slack line with a ratchet versus climbing webbing and carabiners and complicated knots.
Yeah.
So you just put it between two trees. It's like a fabric balance beam, and it's great for balance and core strength. But I started making them out of trampoline material, and then these guys who came from pro skating or climbing or surfing or snowboarding or what have you just took it to a different level and crazy stuff, and they got really good, and we're like, this should be a sport. How do you make a sport? And that's what my job was, make it a sport.
Wow. That's cool. Yeah, I remember it being right in the perfect spot in Vail over the river. So that was a really good spot to have it.
We're over Gore Creek, and then we had the big competition and the Solaire ice rink. That's kind of center of the festival.
That's cool. So when I'm doing consulting with business owners, I always ask them, what events are you holding? And starting to try to think about, like, are you holding client events? Are you holding referral partner events? Are you holding educational events? So really trying to get them to make sure that they're holding events. I know that the moment that I started to do events was when my business really started to scale. So that's cool that you guys were doing events, and that could be a great way to parlay if you do start looking for more business. And you had mentioned having a harder time being in a I would say more male than female industry. Now that you're in 5 years, do you think that has been more of a challenge or more of an advantage being a woman in more of a male dominated profession?
I noticed the most trying to break into this field. All the male brokers that I deal with treat women respectfully, and I don't think there's a disadvantage because it's sales and you generate your own income. There's not that discrepancy you often have in a salaried environment where it's male dominant, that a woman will somehow make less. That's not really the case in this type of field. So once you're in there interacting, it's pretty fair. I don't really see clients saying they don't want to work with a woman, but since they probably know I'm a woman, I might not hear about them.
Yeah. Yeah. I was just curious. I think sometimes it can be better to be unique, right? So there's a certain demographic or a certain age or those type of things. It's like anytime you're breaking the mold, I think can be a benefit versus a hindrance. So I was just curious what that experience has been like for you. Kind of final thoughts of helping young entrepreneurs in sales, marketing, operations, and mindset. What would be your final thoughts and like words of advice for somebody that might be in that 2 to 3 year time frame that's still really trying to break out in their career? What would be your final thoughts for them?
Well, I think for one thing, just don't forget about real life. The younger you are, the more tech savvy you are, and the more engaged your life is online. And
Mm-hmm.
you can't forget about actual life. So it's good to get out and meet people. It's good to hold events or attend events. It's good to just be face to face. And I think a mentor is absolutely critical. And you're not going to find that in a screen, and you're not going to find that on an online course, or you're not going to find that even going to a campus. You need experience if you're trying to break into a brand new career. And people are willing to teach you, but you have to engage them. I think that's a huge piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, I think part of that new thing is I was talking with other business owners, whatever profession it is, it's always tough to bring in somebody that's completely wet behind the ears. But it seems like if you can get the attention of the mentor somehow, some way, it seems like they would bring you on if you're actually persistent enough. But I feel like a lot of people think that just sending that resume is enough. And in many cases, if you're looking for a real mentor, especially in a profession that you're new into, it can be more of a proactive than a just sending something through Indeed type of approach. But I love that idea of the mentor.
Absolutely. And I think what a way to show your sales skills. You need to look for a mentor that is doing the thing that you wish that you were doing. And then you need to figure out how could you help that person make their life easier, make it better. What is it that they need, which is how you close a sale. What does your customer need? Find it, provide it. That's how the deal is done. Your mentor is the same thing. They need something. You just figure out what it is. If it's filing a bunch of papers, if it's data entry, if it's just the worst of the worst. If you're there with energy, making their life easier, they're going to teach you for free. That's all there is to it. And you'll learn tenfold more than you will paying for online credits.
Yeah, I love that. That's awesome tips and tools for sure. Well, I really appreciate all your time. This was definitely some good little nuggets that we can all take away. So I appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
Awesome. And we'll chat with you soon.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, Matt. Have a good day.